amazing panelists. So we might kick off if everyone is ready, and I'm sure there'll be people popping in and out as needed. So welcome everybody to this breakout session, which is around responding with care and choice, reshaping mental health call-outs. My name is Ariane Doza. I am part of the National Justice Project team, and it is my absolute privilege to guide this conversation today with two incredible panelists. As I said, we are talking about reshaping mental health call-outs, which I'm sure everyone in this room agrees is such an important thing that we need to do better at. People in our community who are struggling deserve the highest levels of empathy and care and dignity, and we know that is not always the case, and too often we are seeing and experiencing and feeling unnecessary tragedies happening because clearly the way that we are responding currently is not working. So to explore this area more, we are going to hear from two incredible panelists. Before I get into their incredible bios, I will say that I am joining from the unceded sovereign lands of the Bundjalung people, where I have the privilege of living and working in northern New South Wales, and that the National Justice Project is located on the unceded sovereign lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And we pay our deep respects to elders, past and present, and in particular those who currently and have since the invasion of this place continued to resist police violence. I obviously want to acknowledge that some of the discussion today is, this is real stuff, but it can be distressing and it is sensitive. So I guess listen with care, take care of yourself, and do what you need to do to feel safe and strong. And if you do need to connect with any services, we'll pop them in the chat, and please do reach out if you need to. Also want to mention for the best viewing of these sessions, we have a little bit less control in these rooms. So we do suggest that you use the speaker mode setting in the view. And again, this session is being recorded. So if you do not want your image or name, you can turn your camera off and change your name. The chat function is going to be open. Obviously, we want to hear from you. We want your questions and comments, but please be really respectful, and let's have a respectful and kind and courageous discussion today. We're going to hear from the panelists and go through some sort of questions and things with them and hear about all their experience and expertise. And then we will, of course, go to questions from you. So please do continue to pop them into the chat, and my wonderful colleagues will be collecting all of those, and we will get to those in the second sort of half of the session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our wonderful speakers. We have Giancarlo de Vera, who is a respected disability, racial justice and LGBTIQ+ human rights advocate, proudly queer, non-binary, intersectional leader of colour. Giancarlo is currently CEO of Being Mental Health Consumers, the New South Wales peak body for mental health consumers, and is the senior co-chair of the Disability Rights Committee at the Australian Lawyers for Human Rights. They sit on numerous government and social service sector boards and have been recognised by Pro Bono Australia in their Impact 25, a publicly voted list for Australians making the most social impact in Australia and abroad, and is one of the 40 under 40 most influential Asian Australians. So quite the bio there. And then we have the absolute privilege of having Judy Deacon join us, who is a passionate advocate and New South Wales-based campaigner, drawing from a lifetime of lived experience with mental health, health services, police, docs, and the prison systems. Judy's personal journey took a tragic turn on the 20th of July 2023 when her son Jesse was shot and killed by police during a welfare check at his home. Emergency services assistance were called, and due to police responded first, ended in his death, igniting Judy's resolute commitment to drive systemic change. In the wake of her loss, Judy became a powerful voice for reform, calling for urgent improvements to both the police response to mental health crises and the broader support systems available to affected families. Central to Judy's advocacy is the push for a dedicated mental health support line to be integrated into the 000 emergency line, with mental health clinicians available 24/7 alongside ambulance, fire and police. Judy is also a vocal proponent of several key issues, including supported affordable accommodation, the timely and comprehensive implementation of coroner recommendations, and greater police accountability. Judy, we are so honoured to have you here with us today, and we pay our deep respects to you and your son, Jesse. So, more than ever, we have policies, frameworks and rights-focused instruments around mental health, from national roadmaps to international human rights. However, there is still this ad hoc reliance on police and little and slow policy movement on first responders. First of all, I'm going to put it to both of you around, what do you think is the missing piece to why we are still so reliant on police, and what are the core issues of the current response? So just as a kind of opening, I might throw to you, Judy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity. One of the very important things about advocacy is to be given that voice, to be able to try and push forward change. As far as I'm concerned, if Jesse had grown up to be a policeman, gone to work and shot somebody dead, I would not be happy. So I'm not actually on any side here. I think the police and their families most of them have just as much to gain from reform as the victims because the families are also victims, and we're guilty because we have a mental illness or because our family member does have that illness. So I don't think this is a state problem. I think this is a national problem, and I think national should take it on and standardise. And apart from various reforms, which I'm pushing, and the latest one is the thought of getting police health motorcyclists. We've got 3 in the state, because they can get through traffic, they can get there, getting more support to those people who are on the end of the 000 line, who is the first person usually that is in contact with them. But the bottom line is upstairs, right at the very effing top. They're all looking after themselves and not us. And we are all different, but we are all part of the community and we all have a contribution to make. We are working together, the people whose families I'm involved with and the organisations, which include the Black Caucus, we're all moving forward together to get these changes. And until the police clean up their act and get rid of the thugs and the murderers and the people who have no repercussions occurring because they're protecting the system, not the police, and certainly not us, nothing's going to change. But apart from the 2 ladies who worked in Canada, who are in their 60s, I'm actually 81. I've still got another 20 years to go and I'm not going anywhere.
Thank goodness for that, Judy. You're amazing. Thank you for those opening insights. Giancarlo, I might ask you to share some opening thoughts around this to bring you into this discussion.
Thanks, Ariane. And first, I just want to acknowledge that I'm calling from unceded Gadigal land. And also that I'm incredibly honoured to be on this panel with Judy. She should change her name to Beacon as opposed to Deacon, because she absolutely is a beacon in this space. And dare I say, looks great for 81. Look, but like on a serious note, I wanted just to pick up on something that Judy said, and that was the fact that she said police have something to gain. I want to say no, we have everybody has something to gain from shifting away from police being first responders. And that's because what is at the heart of this issue is that we are criminalising mental health challenges. And it is a criminalisation of mental health challenges that is really a mask for a bigger problem. It's the fact that, when you think about what drives mental health challenges, they are basically a reflection of people's human rights not being met. Whether it's housing, whether it's not having jobs or being economically insecure, whether it's not accessible services, whatever it is, it's that foundation that drives mental health challenges. And so when people rightfully experiencing these mental health challenges, and then experience crises as a result of having our human rights not being met, and then to have be criminalised for that, like, we're poorer for it, and we can all stand to gain from being able to have our human rights met and to not have our basic human rights be met with criminalisation.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And I guess following on from that, how do alternative responses build trust? We talked about we all have something to gain, but how can moving towards some of these alternatives actually build trust within communities that have, traditionally and in some cases currently being criminalised and ignored? How do we make sure that alternatives not simply shifting police powers or moving to a medicalised response, but actually building that stronger ecosystem?
You want me to go first, or?
Go for it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, just on the topic of trust, I wanted just to say, and this is something that Being has publicly said, we need to have an apology first. How can we rebuild trust without a public apology from New South Wales Police? It irks me every year when we commemorate fallen police officers. And to Judy's point around, the system protecting itself and the criminal system not doing its job to protect the victims of these murders. Where is our memorial for the 52 people at least who have died as mental health consumers in this state in the last few years? We don't see the police minister making a song and dance. We don't see the premier making a song and dance about these mental health consumers dying at the hands of lethal force from the police. So we need a public apology. How can we possibly gain trust again from the institution of the police that's meant to protect us, meant to protect mental health consumers, if we can't get them to say they stuffed up? So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Which leads me to, a few points around trust and how do we move towards that shift. New South Wales has been thinking about what a health-led response can look like for quite a while now. I saw Patricia Reid in the participants. I don't know if she's in this room now, from New South Wales Health. And it's my understanding that, the consultations for a health-led response will come out imminently sometime this month. And so I want to say to those here in the room that we need to engage in those consultations. And so while Being wasn't involved in the consultation design for the consultation, it's got to be incredibly important that we have our voices represented and reflected in the consultations. And so that leads me to a subsequent point around lived experience. People like Judy, people like the members of Being, to be involved in design in designing what a health-led response looks like, and that has to not just be, it has to be the starting point. We can't have lived experience, be extracted at the point of consultation and then forgotten and not harnessed again in the future. We need to have a governance model that supports this. And I think a key aspect of making sure we're on the right track is public reporting and public accountability to achieve the outcomes that we want to see of zero deaths. And so one of the things that being in mental health care areas New South Wales have pushed for is for the public reporting of those who were killed. Go back to my first point about the apology. Police need to report on how many people who experience mental health crisis are shot or otherwise injured by them every year, and that needs to be tabled in Parliament, so we have public accountability in the highest halls of power to shine a light and reflect back on this disproportionate power that the police have around, A, protecting themselves, and B, getting away from, and in the case of Colin Burling, claiming they're mental health consumers themselves. And so from our perspective, that's going to be a real key opportunity for us as well to be able to ensure that we stay on the right track. So I've got more thoughts, but I'll hand over to Judy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Police recruitment is difficult. It's down. A lot of them are ex-army, especially up in the Northern Territory. Suicide prevention in the police force is also not working. The culture is not healthy or supportive, and the police are lacking training. It's impossible to give people training for the sort of things they're going to have to face. I don't advocate for police to be out of situations, but we do need, and it's all lip service still, we do need a completely enormous mental health team who are available to go out, because the police don't want to do this job. I've met with the head of the union. I can't meet the police minister because of the conflict of interest. My case isn't coming up till next year. Neither can I meet with the Prime Minister or Mr. Minns, who I actually never, ever want to meet, because he certainly hasn't got my community in his sights. If I haven't got a building to build, he's not there. There is money being spent here, there, and everywhere. But again, number one, if you don't want to do the job, you need to support other organisations like the Health Service to be able to put in place a replacement for you. And that's pretty much what I need to say about that.
Thank you, Judy. I guess just on that, when we're thinking about, this moving towards an alternative, what are those key things that are principles or pieces of the puzzle that are needed? Obviously, you're talking about workforce, who's going to actually be those supports, who's going to do that work. Are there any other sort of key pillars or key principles and values that you could speak to, Judy, around that are central to effective mental health call-outs?
Well, there is going to be involvement of peer support people very soon. How long is a piece of string? But we will get there. They need to share their structural responsibility and change their priorities from self-aggrandizement and interest to working with other organisations, reassigning some of their funding, because they're all pre-planned. All the money that's already given to them, they've already spent it. And involve us, because I'm not just speaking for myself and my family and my son. First of all, I like a police liaison officer immediately given to the victims' families, because the person who's been shot dead, he's dead. That's it, he's dead. But what happens to the family? They wait 3 years or more before they get a coronial inquiry just to tell them that their relative is dead. And also, there's lots of problems that go on. There's body-worn cameras by some, tactical police versus general duty. What we need is help straight away, because the mental health just gets bigger when you've got people who aren't coping and they don't see any reward or justice at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Judy.
I just also like to say that the Black Caucus, Luke Gilbert, Todd McKenzie, Courtney Topic, Colin Burling, and many, many, many others who will be nameless but who we're involved with, need their day. And we may not want to go to court because we might be, where's the money coming from anyway? Nobody's got money. If you've got a little bit of money, you can't get assistance, but you're still spending money you don't have because two young officers with a senior officer who's waiting in the lobby go in and shoot your son dead. That's it.
If I can add a couple of things, because I feel like any principle for we're estimated to have two really key principles in any model, and the first has to be an explicit non-coercive mandate. For too long, the police force and others who aren't police, particularly for those who support mental health consumers, use all manners of restraints, of force, of restrictive practices that basically, disempowers people and obviously traumatizes people. And so we need to really have that as a strong foundation for any alternative, and a non-coercive mandate has to be, and connected to that is my second principle, and that's around a focus on voluntary supports. If the point of responding to mental health crisis is to de-escalate the mental health crises, and we need to ensure that we have people. We talked about peer workforces, and I want to plug quickly peer workforces. We need to be able to connect those individuals experiencing crises, to voluntary community-based and peer-led supports, whether that be housing supports, whether it be counselling, whether it be psychosocial in nature, whatever the supports is, they need to have a choice and be able to be referred to those supports in order to address the drivers of those mental health challenges that have got them in the situation in the first place. And that goes back to my point about the human rights not being met. And I just wanted to quickly just address a comment that was made in the chat from, I think it was Michelle from NCOS, and about power sharing. And Judy touched on this just in her response, and I touched a bit earlier. We need community-led governance as well as a key principle in any model, where we can establish oversight committees, not just on cases where people get killed, but also ensuring that they continue to monitor practices of the police and any first responder, not just any responder, to ensure that the service bears fidelity to these principles that we're calling for, and that is a form of power sharing. If we've got an oversight role through a mechanism to ensure that the governance of any model is bearing fidelity to what we want to do, then that's us exercising our power, and that obviously has to be led by lived experience.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very, very important points there. And I think that governance piece is something in whatever direction things take that has to be absolutely emphasised. Judy, if you don't mind, I'd like to go now specifically to the sort of fourth line on the fourth option on O that you have been advocating for. Which would see mental health practitioner responding, perhaps with peer support, as you mentioned before. I guess wanted to hear more from you about that as a model going forward. A little bit more about what that means and what that would look like, and perhaps if you have any insights on what maybe some of the barriers might be in implementing that. And how do we make sure that it doesn't just default back to police? Thank you, Judy.
So when something like this happens, usually everyone complains about this went wrong, that went wrong, the other went wrong. People don't want to call 000 to get the police. The police don't want people to call 000 for mental health situations. So that's why I've been pushing to add this to the 000. Everybody knows 000. Yasmin Catley actually said on a Channel 10 interview, it's a practical idea. If it's so fucking practical, why don't you just bloody well do it? Because people are scared. The people who rang the ambulance for Jesse are devastated because they feel that it's their fault that he was killed. It's simple, but people, like I said before, each organisation wants to work in isolation with itself. They don't want to lose money, reallocate money. We had trouble with the Industrial Revolution way back when, a bit before my time, but it worked. In the end, people got over it, and it was necessary. And not only that, but we've heard today about other countries and even other states other than good old New South Wales who've done really good stuff and are doing similar or, something. England, everyone. But we're such a fabulous state with such a wonderful premier that we don't do anything anybody else thinks of. Well, get over it or get out. That's what I've got to say.
Thank you, Judy. I couldn't agree more.
That's why I'm here. Like I said, I'm old. I've got nothing to lose. My son is no longer. I'm triggered by everything, including that poem. I've got to suppress everything until something gets done, not for just me, but for all the other families and all the tragedy that's happening without prevention in the Northern Territory. Because without our voices, nobody's going to do anything.
Thank you. Giancarlo, do you have anything to add to that sort of fourth option idea?
I can't follow that. Get out. As Judy says. No, look, I support Judy's, push for that fourth option, but I guess we guys are going to be live to, I guess, the technical issues involved. Firstly, we need to have health, not police, to engage. So we need that first, is my opinion. And once we've got that, then if we were to have this fourth option on Triple O, then that's where we can refer them to. Mm-hmm. And so that I feel like that has to happen first.
Which is that sort of workforce question.
Yeah, and we won't, and otherwise we're just creating, we're creating the fourth option with nowhere to go, and so that for me is something critical we need to establish first, and then absolutely, Judy, fourth option, 000. Let's get over ourselves and get it done.
Amazing, and I guess
it's up to the health service to look at their budget and how they're spending it and say, we need to recruit people. We need to pay them a wage that's comparable, let's say, even to the police wages, so that they're happy to join, and also support them in their work and train them properly. Get them from overseas, anywhere, but they're out there, but it's up to them. And hopefully with all these group meetings that they're having and that we're supposed to be part of, we, the unpaid idiots, hopefully they will reassign their finances and find, just like with the police force, they won't recruit people if they don't give them the proper support to enable them to do the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which leads me to another point. Sorry, I know you probably want to progress. But Judy makes a really good point about participatory budgeting. There's nothing stopping our governments having roles for the community to have a direct say in how funds are used. At the moment, for those who don't know, it's a very closed process as to how the state budget is kind of decided. It's very, smokes and mirrors, and you kind of got to follow a bit of an opaque process to figure out how money is allocated in any budget. So it makes sense for us, for those who are affected by situations like Judy, to use their lived experience to have a role and a voice in how community funds, our funds as taxpayers, is spent. And that's called participatory budgeting. And goes back to the power sharing.
And can I also say that I've had a meeting, thanks to Lisa Topic, Courtney's mother, with Emma McBride, who is the National Assistant Minister for Mental Health, Suicide Prevention, Rural and Regional Health, and we talked about peer support and certification so that families who have been put in this situation, not all the family will want to get involved, but somebody out there will be able to say, hey, I want to help with this, I want to get involved with this, I can get a job doing this. So it's a national thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just we're going to move on to some questions from the audience very shortly. But I guess I just wanted to touch on, we've been talking about that sort of workforce that the who's actually going to be responding if it's not police, and that absolutely there's some questions around, where we're getting the budget from that, but we all agree that we need to invest in it. I guess I just wanted to put to both of you around, can you share from your perspective, what are some of those critical skills and capabilities that workforce can provide? Does anyone have anything to share from that, I guess, just to really highlight what unique position they will hold as opposed to what is currently on offer? Judy, do you have any thought about that?
Well, look, my son was 43, and I reckon that I knew him as far as you can know your own child, because they've got their own little culture going, which is a secret from the parent. I knew him better than anyone. And so the years that I spent fielding this, that and the other, advocating for him, getting him out of hot water, trying to cope with mental health situations, and I'm just the same as every other parent and family member who's had their relative put in prison, targeted, profiled, victimised. We know, but the problem for us is we don't have qualifications, we don't have certificates, we don't have university degrees, and we're also a threat to people who do have and who, well, not all of them, but some of them are absolutely useless anyway, and they just spend more money on more degrees. And that's why they don't want us. But they're going to get us one way or the other. They will get us.
Yeah, so really that lived experience and that sort of that peer support. Thank you, Judy. Giancarlo, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, it'd be remiss for me to not say that any worker in this potential workforce need to be trauma informed. The compounded trauma is an obvious issue that would need to be contended with any model. And so part of that, for me, is having really important skills around therapeutic communication, having an open appetite to and openness to non-medicalised models of supports. Going back to my point about voluntary supports, how do we I think bar peer workers, anyone who could be a potential worker in this potential workforce, there is a risk aversion to what supports can be provided and referred to. So we need to dispel that and really get to a point where, right, how do we actually then apply, understand the person? How do we then understand what their needs are? How do we then ensure that the person that we've identified what the needs are properly, because there's going to be always issues in discerning that, particularly for those with complex mental health challenges. And how do we then ensure that they've got the pathways to referrals to get to the right supports, where the evidence base for these supports may not meet the threshold or the risk appetite for health or for other public agencies. And so from my perspective, that openness to that is crucial. The other thing I think that workers need to have in their back pocket and in their tool belt is a really strong sense of social justice. Like, as I said earlier, it's people when the human rights aren't being met, are experiencing mental health challenges significantly and disproportionately. And so how do we do that? And crucial to that is respecting the will and preference and the autonomy of that person to make choices, to stuff up because how else do you learn if you don't stuff up? The dignity of risk is huge, hugely valuable to people who've been taught by life that they can't trust or feel safe anywhere. And so it's those skills that they're very soft, but they're very crucial to supporting mental health consumers get to a point where they can become what I call the custodian of their own life's meaning and the meaning of their own mental health challenges. Because mental health consumers, we have been forced by a system to be disempowered and disenfranchised by the labels that are given to us, and there's this whole process that a lot of our members go through where they reclaim that meaning back from them, and that's where it's really crucial for these soft skills to facilitate that process, and health team workers and workers in the workforce need to be live to that.
Can I just say that team is crucial, which is why peer support people need to be involved. I repeat that having a mental health affliction is not a crime. It's an unfortunate situation that can happen to anybody, no matter what their background. So we need to be included. We need training. We need to be able to work with people, and we need to be listened to and believed.
Thank you, Judy. That's very, very important. And I think, Giancarlo, what you were talking about in terms of it's reflecting a lot of the discussions that have been happening within our coalition members around, I guess, where consent and agency sit within any of these discussions, and making naturally reflecting, the advocacy of organisations like yourself in making sure that the consent and agency of people who are experiencing an issue, or the people who are facing the potential police involvement or the alternative response, that their agency and dignity is upheld first and foremost in their choice. So that's very reflective of some of those discussions. So thank you. I might just quickly jump to some of the questions. Just want to make sure we get through some of those. Judy, I might start with you if that's okay. There have been a lot of the questions coming through around mental health stigma. And you have spoken a little bit already to this, but as well within the police force, and creating a culture of silence and a lack of mental health consumers and lived experience voices within the police themselves. Do you have any thoughts on how we could change this? And I guess, it could be even broader, not only within the police force, but I know there have been some questions around specifically within the police force. How could we potentially change this stigma and this culture? And how do we actually create more peer support responders for mental health call-outs?
Well, first of all, you've got to locate them and find them and use them. But I've noticed we've had two memorials for Jessie at the Town Hall, which was supported by politicians, the Lord Mayor. It's been really great. And I have noticed over time that when I see police in general, there's a different vibe. They're not aggressive and hostile, the ones I've observed, which means that something's getting through. But once again, it's not up to them, it's up to their bosses, who are the ones that allow the ones who give them a bad name and who allow them to ruin an organisation that, in my day of 81 years old, was not like this at all. So they're the ones that have got to work together with all the other organisations, like the health service and this and that, and just solve the problem, because tomorrow it could be your child who gets the mental illness and gets shot by his colleague. Dead.
Yeah, it's certainly a shared responsibility for everybody. Thank you, Judy. Giancarlo, there's one for you from one of the audience who sits on a Victorian Police Disability Police Community Advisory Group and feels it's very limited in its scope, as I'm sure we know lots of the advisory groups are. I guess just following on from our early discussions around what does genuine engagement with community look like, I guess do you have any further thoughts on how do we really effectively involve consumers, people with lived experience in the process and actually begin or expand that decision-making, sharing of decision-making?
Thank you. And thank you to Ricky. Nice to see you, Ricky, for the question. Look, one of the things that Being has called for is actually a truth-telling roundtable. And so that's the first thing I want to say in response to that question. We see it as, this is a joint thing that position that both Being and Mental Health Care Agency of Wales have called for. We see it as a first step towards healing. And I think that's, I don't think we can do anything until we get it out there. Let the blood bleed. Let the air out. Let's just get it all out there. And so we've actually called for the government in New South Wales to host that roundtable, so we can hear directly from everyone affected, and also use it as a demonstration of commitment to the need to shift away from the status quo. So that's the first thing I want to say. And yeah, there's, and it's definitely, I can see Joanne's comment in the chat, it's obviously important for mob as well, and given the overrepresentation of mob in these situations, it's absolutely crucial for that purpose too. So thank you, Joe. Nice to see you too. But in terms of the governance piece, look, I think my short answer is I think that's a matter for further consultation for the community. I think we need to be able to bring people together and decide what that governance model looks like. These committees have way too much hot air inflated into them, and how do we then ensure that they've got that? I do think we do have some experiences. Future opportunities on the horizon, at least in New South Wales. So I can't comment for Victoria, but we've got suicide prevention legislation that has just passed in the state. And that has legislated whole of government approaches to mental health. And so I think, and that's going to have a governance structure that supports, hopefully, the integration of lived experience across government so they can address suicide prevention. And that could be, and so things like that could be a really important, or legal mechanisms like that could be a really important way to ensure that we have both teeth and force behind our voice. And that's really crucial that we've got legal mechanisms to do that. So if you don't have legal mechanisms in your jurisdiction, consider how you could create those legal mechanisms. I also think with the police, with advisory committees, I do think there is a role also for advisory committees to be able to evaluate the work of any public agency. So in this case, the Victorian Police. One of the things that we're working with here in New South Wales is with the Law Enforcement Commission, is that they are wanting to, use their data that they've got from all these experiences that they've come across to help inform the training of police, because they're able, even though we do move towards a new model, that police will still have a role to play. That we can't eject them out entirely, and so they're already proactively supporting, and the work supporting this to help them decide what that training looks like, and so there's a translational piece that lived experience can also have a really important role to play in understanding what the data, what the stories tell us. And that's a really key point too. We need to have a role in evaluation. So we can take the information we've got and translate that for the idiots who don't know what it actually means. And that's really crucial, because that's where you get iterative processes. That's where you get refinement. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about making sure we bear fidelity to the original vision for the model in the first place.
So one of the questions that's really important is that there was some training. Lisa Topic, who's Courtney's mother, has been working at this for 9-10 years, and she has gone in with her husband to do police training. They were receptive, and it just was dumped. Because why?
Well, we definitely need a mandate training. There used to be a 4-day training in New South Wales Police that I have no visibility on where that is. There's a whole mental health division in New South Wales Police that no one really understands, not even the mental health commissioner. And so it's really crucial that, in the police force itself, that we have clarity around how the police are not only protecting and improving the mental health of their own workforce, their police officers, but making sure that they are getting the right training, so if they were to respond, even though we don't want them to, they know what to do.
Thank you both and to everyone for their questions. I would like to go to a question that come around, I guess, the mental health system itself, and that it is, underpinned by some of that same carceral logic of policing, and that lots of people do experience, don't have very positive experience within that system either. So I guess the question is, and I might throw to you first, Judy, in looking at alternatives, like how do we avoid replicating the harm, even if it is, potentially a health-based response? If it's still forced care of some description, how do we make sure that we're not just, shifting things and replicating that harm within another system? And I guess you've had lots of experience within these systems, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So, when you have a mental illness, often you don't think you have when you're feeling good. Jesse has been hospitalised on several occasions, and then out the door and back into the community so that he could, because there's no follow-up, there's no care. He has had a community treatment order, which means that he had to go for an injection every 2 weeks to stabilise him. But nobody actually said, I like your shirt, how you doing? It's like, here's your shot, off you go, goodbye. And so the health department is just as much to blame in their own way for Jesse's death as the police, because they don't, they're just, I don't know, why don't they care? Why don't the people upstairs stop going to lavish lunches and raising their incomes and make sure that the people they're supposed to be looking after are followed up, looked after, and prevent some of these things that shouldn't be happening. That's all I've got to say about the health service, because my aim is, I can't fight every battle. Everybody's got their own contribution to make to each aspect of this enormous octopus and its tentacles. But wake up, health service, because you can't blame the police and the public when you're just as guilty as everybody else in not saving people who you think are the dregs of humanity, who don't deserve respect and fair treatment. And that's what I've got to say. And Jesse's had every opportunity known to man, including going to the school King Charles went to when he was a kid, and yet he ended up with a mental illness he couldn't do anything about, and neither could we. And the services that are there for him were not. That's it.
Thank you, Judy. I expect Giancarlo does not want to follow that either. Very powerful. But Giancarlo, do you have anything to add to that in terms of, I guess, the system on the other side, or what more needs to be done in terms of building up that capacity of these services and supports to do what we ultimately want them to do?
I want to connect two ideas together that I've already introduced. We've already talked about choice and agency, and the importance of that, and the need for primacy of voluntary choices. And I want to connect that idea to then the idea around what I said earlier around when human rights aren't being met, we see mental health challenges. Really, that's a story of the fragmentation of systems. It's a story of fragmentation between the health system, the justice system, social services, a range of systems that are meant to support people, and they're fragmented, and we have bureaucratic silos and obstacles that don't promote the integration of cross-sectoral models. And that's, I think, really key to ensure that we don't replicate the carceral logic of the current status quo. if we're going to have this new model, how do we make sure that the referral pathway that we want to push actually is meaningful? And then because at the end of the day, we're humans. We can't just be broken down into, we have problems upon problems upon problems, layers and layers of problems. And the bureaucracy will say we need to try and break them down, but humans we're not an onion. And even though an ogre might say he's an onion, but we can't just peel the layers back and then address them one layer at a time. We need to deal with them at the same time, in integrated ways. And you can't do that when you've got systems that are fragmented. And if we can get cross-sectoral, cross-government portfolio ownership, basically all governments saying they have a responsibility for mental health, then you actually, not just the mental health minister, then you actually can pierce through the carceral logic, and you can then actually activate the choice that I was calling for before. You can't activate choice when there isn't systems in place to support the choice, and that is a really crucial thing in piercing through and breaking down that logic of carceral and violence.
Thank you. That was very powerful, and I think it's exactly what we need some of the other decision makers to listen to a little bit more thoughtfully and take up. So thank you. Judy, if you have nothing to add to that, I might jump to another question.
Yeah, just jump.
I guess I want to acknowledge that there are other families in this session that have direct lived experiences of loss from these exact scenarios that we're talking about. So I really want to acknowledge you, the family of Todd McKenzie and Courtney Topic. Really great to have you, Lisa, and Margaret, and others here with us today. And I just want to go to some of the questions coming from you. So we talk about these, we know that the tactical police units, and Judy, I know you spoke a little bit about them before, are regularly called in to deal with people who may have locked themselves in their homes or things like that. I guess what's happening when the paramedics or the question is, what's happening when the paramedics or the EMS are called the police? Police often don't wear body-worn cameras, and there's no accountability. So and then there's no accountability when they use that unjustified and lethal force. So I guess, do you have any insight into what's actually happening in those scenarios? Judy?
Look, there's a lot of things that the police should be doing to clean up their act. One of them is to have, possibly because they're, I want to be really not rude here, but they have guns. They shouldn't have guns, but maybe some of them can have guns. The body-worn cameras should be automatic with everyone. I've seen Jesse's video 3 times now, once with the coronial, the lawyer, not because I wanted to see him die, but because I wanted to see how it all happened, why it happened in his own home, where they broke in without any preamble or, oh, we're here to help you. It's, I think that families should be given access. And like I said before, there needs to be a police liaison person. I was very lucky in some respects because my DCI, Detective Chief Inspector, every time I phoned him, he said blah, 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 whatever, and it's been great. I believe Lisa also had help from Gary Jubilin, but she had to ask. It was months before somehow or other they got connected. We should be connected with somebody, and if we don't like that person, somebody else, especially assigned to help the families to survive. And then that's good PR. That's making police your next door neighbour instead of the guy that's going to submachine gun you next day.
Yeah, and it's about much more than PR, isn't it? It's humanity. our rights. So thank you, Judy. I'm very sorry, everybody. I seem to have completely missed the time management of my role. We are very much due back in the other room in a moment. I want to thank you both as our panelists for all of your insights.